Welcome, David. I've been looking forward to this call. So it's been a few weeks since we officially announced you guys joining MBH, and got a lot of attention both in the industry and beyond. Looking forward to this call. It was at ADT when we acquired you, but you were in the rebrand transition. So I'll let you share with us a little bit about that later on. But I thought this would be a great opportunity for some of our investors who wanted to kind of see a little bit behind the numbers and behind the sort of the press releases and understand a little bit more about you guys. So maybe we could start with you. How did you get into this line of business, and what was your
Yeah,
background?
it actually wasn't planned like the best things in life. I actually started off studying law, and it was way back in 1988. So, it was a long time ago, and it was at the time when the word gazumping was happening. So, I was doing
Yeah.
conveyancing while studying, and spent lots and lots of time creating big old files. It wasn't computerized, and running along down streets of the streets of Leicester to the vendors or the sellers, solicitors, and getting there only to be gazumped. So I got a little bit fed of this. It was a bit stressful. So I took a year out and travelled to Spain, Switzerland, and America on the old Interrail, etc. And
Mhm.
came back and then ended up with a job in marketing. I thought I didn't want. I was going to put law on hold, and that led to a career with EMAP, the publishers down in London.
Yeah.
And whilst I was down in London, Disneyland Paris opened, and it wasn't a huge success, Disneyland Paris, and so they started doing promotions in the magazines that I headed up. Because I became director of advertising, and we were doing promotions to fill their on-site hotels. And we found a
Mhm.
little niche with school travel, so it was very a safe environment for schools to travel to, and there they could study leisure and tourism, language, business studies, etc.
Okay.
So I actually then set up a little company just doing this exclusively for Disney, and that went on for a few years until I sold that business. And but part of the deal with the selling the business meant that it didn't include some of the assets of the business, which was minibuses and coaches. So hence ADT was born because I still had to pay the leases on these things. So we developed. I joined forces with my partner Ashley. I'm David, so that's where the ADT comes from. Ashley David Taxis, and so we started off getting school contracts, and within 2 years, we managed to get the contract for Loughborough University, which meant we could be on sited on there. And Loughborough University has got one of the largest students' unions in the country with a capacity of 5,000 students. So we suddenly found we were very busy. And so that sort of fueled the growth. And the rest, as I say, is history. So that's how it all started.
So when was that? Was that like 2012?
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, 2012, possibly a bit before that. Yeah, the years just fly by. So yeah, by 2012, we were at the university, which was going great because in those days, every night was like Saturday night for students. What killed it a little bit later on in a few years, moving forwards, was when they brought in the tuition fees. If you remember, Nick Clegg had a battering for that one, wasn't it? So that slowed it down a little bit. So all of a sudden they had to find, I think, £9,000, 10,000, which previously was going on entertainment and drinking, etc. Um,
Yeah.
but we've certainly noticed the change of students over the years. They're a lot more healthy than they used to be. Bottles of Nuki Ale and cigarettes have gone out the window to smoothies and running 6 miles a day. So yeah, it's a different
Right.
market now. But it tends to be more cafe culture, eating out with the occasional blowout.
interesting and very pleasing to hear that students are becoming more mature, far more mature than we were. What are some of the other changes that you've seen in the last 15, 20 years?
Yeah, well, when we first started it was the very manual process. So it was a telephone, a piece of paper, and a pen, and you'd write down the cash jobs in blue, and you'd write down the credit jobs in red, and it was basically like playing chess with cards. And you just had a two-way radio. So when people are calling up, "Where's my cab?" you were very much guessing because, of course, you couldn't see where they were. You know, it was the old line, "Oh, it's 5 minutes away." So it was quite stressful, and the dispatchers and operators, it was a very skillful job because you were working off this radio system, and certainly on a busy Saturday night, patience disappeared, and a lot of swear words when drivers were running late and the customer was on the phone. But then around about sort of 2012-13, we invested in a dispatch system, which was, at that case, it was quite expensive. It was server based, and it used to run off like one of those big old fashioned PDAs with a GPS receiver attached to it. So technology changed us then. That fueled further expansion. The only problem was it was quite expensive, the hardware. So it was around about £1,000 per driver to put an extra driver on. So if you wanted to add 10 drivers, obviously there's a £10,000 fee. Moving on to 2015, the first cloud-based system came in, which got rid of all the hardware. You could run it off any mobile device, and the drivers could download their app onto the driver app to receive the jobs, the data, onto their smartphones. So all of a sudden, this cost of adding drivers just disappeared overnight, and it moved to a pay-as-you-go kind of service. So you were paying like £2-3 per driver per week. So you could literally ask a driver to come forward and work for you for 2 weeks, not charge him anything, so you could try it out. So we literally, since joining iCabby, which is the cloud-based system, went from sort of 50 cars to 300 cars in the first 200 years, and sort of continued that expansion. And it also meant that our automation levels went up because attached to that was a consumer app. So actually, we were doing Uber before Uber were doing Uber in the Midlands, and it meant we could move back.
Yeah, so let's stay with that, because I think that's really interesting to me, because I think taxi companies, certainly in the media, have been written off a little bit over the last few years. There's kind of a perception that Uber and its other very well-funded, loss-making competitors are out there and have just basically taken the market away from traditional taxi companies. So what's your impression, and how does that back up what you're saying?
We were kind of doing the Uber model anyway, where drivers work on a percentage. So what happened was Uber came in guns blazing into the UK, starting off in London. And as you said, they got a lot of money to throw at it. They could guarantee driver earnings, even they could buy the customers with their vouchers. And in areas where taxi companies hadn't embraced the technology, they were wiped out very quickly. But Uber only caters for a certain market, and in a way, in the UK, you have an advanced taxi industry. There's two types. There's the private hire, which is pre-booking, and there's the hackney carriage, which is on demand. In most markets outside the UK, it's all that on demand, hailing a taxi. So what Uber managed to do was possibly replace the hackney industry, that on demand, for outside train stations, airports, and so on. But they didn't go in doing the pre-booking service. So that kept companies like ourselves, which predominantly private hire, i.e. pre-booking, alive, and gave us a chance to update the technology which we already had. So what you've found in the UK is Uber really hasn't been successful outside of London. And of course, at the moment, their license in London is still debating whether that's going to be issued. So outside of London, Uber haven't been successful, and what they've actually done is they've expanded the market. So they've made apps. Everyone's aware of the apps now. They've made taxis user-friendly. Taxi companies have upped the game. So what you found is most companies like ourselves and numerous others around the country where there's an Uber presence in the city have expanded because more people have used the service because it's suddenly become easily accessible, and that old image of cabs being dirty, smoky, run by a backstreet office with Sharon with a bad attitude, smoking a cigarette, answering the phone, that's all gone now. It's very tech savvy and safe. And even licensing, years ago, you could come out of prison, go to the licensing office, give them £75, and hey, presto, you got a private hire license. Whereas now, everyone is DBS checked. They have to go for courses, knowledge tests. They have to learn about child safety. So it's a 12-week process, and of course we run training courses for that. So the industry has become more professional, but Uber hasn't worked outside of London. And also the USP of the private hire companies like ourselves, well, there's several. First of all, we all make money. We're all profitable. Secondly, we've got the local knowledge. And thirdly, we've still got that USP that the customer can still call us. So, Mrs. Doris, who has to go to the doctors or have a haircut, and she's not smartphone familiar, she can still call us and make that booking. And of course, some of the bookings are more complicated. It's a wedding party, and we need to go via cash point machine. That can be all organised over a phone, but not so easy on an app. And of course, outside of the cities, the 4G, 3G, 5G network is still a bit dodgy. So, some of the apps simply don't work in certain pockets of the country. So we get that bite of the cherry as well.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I've heard you say that before, kind of about that older generation that's still more comfortable kind of picking up the phone, and certainly when I'm with my mother in the UK, she finds it more frustrating to watch the car on the screen, especially if it gets stuck in traffic or heaven forbid goes the wrong way.
Shouting at the phone.
Yeah. I mean, what does constantly amuse me about that is, I think average wait times now. So here in Singapore, it's probably don't wait more than about 6 or 7 minutes, and yet the anger people get to if it's a minute late, and when I first got to
that's the society we live in now, isn't it? It's an on-demand society. Patience has gone out the window. People literally expect them to drop out the sky and lay in front of them.
And they practically do. I mean, the fact that you can press a button in your pocket and have a ton of metal outside your door waiting to take you to your next destination within 5 minutes is it's amazing how quickly we've become accustomed to that. But so just on that technology front and where it's going, and I know you guys have been I think you're sort of probably one of the more proactive in terms of thinking about the technologies, and we've talked about you launched a food on demand service just before the whole COVID thing hit, but it's really that there's such an interesting opportunity around that last mile logistics and that space that you guys are so comfortable with that other people are struggling with. And I mean, it's quite, I think I've used a couple of times, it really doesn't matter to you whether it's a person, a pizza, or a parcel. It's and where do you see that going and the opportunities around that?
Well, The opportunity, and one of the reasons we started talking to the MBH is if I go back to Uber as an example. So Uber has this national brand, and it's data savvy. It's built a network. However, it doesn't make any money. Whereas you've got the private hire industry that is experts in their field, and they do make money, but it's very fragmented. So the idea is to bring them all together, one network, one brand, use that expertise and that profitability to build. So, because where the industry, mobility as a service is where the industry is going. So what do I mean by that? Well, that's taxis, traditionally, as you say, moving people around, moving parcels around, delivering food, or delivering anything. We have one guy who imports fish, exotic fish from Brazil, and we're picking them up from Gatwick. So, boxes of fish. So there's anything, but it all has to network in and to be on one platform, so it can link into a courier service, or you can have an app where it can link into that. So if you want a delivery or you want to travel to the airport, it will book the taxi, the train, and so on. And as each month goes by, we're through iCabby and our software, we're linking into a lot of these platforms. So it doesn't matter the brand and so on. And even Uber themselves, this last couple of weeks, have announced that in the UK, because they haven't managed to attack the private hire industry, they now want to be friends with it. And through our dispatch systems, we can now take Uber bookings. So everyone is working together on one system. And as the motor industry changes, so you don't go out and buy that expensive piece of metal anymore, that's going to change. So you kind of just have it on demand, you use it. And so even car rentals can go onto the system, and there's a company called Brunel in London, which is a chauffeur type company. That's being bought by Eurocars, with a view to that not only can have a taxi, but they can also rent out their fleets and so on. So the whole industry, all these elements are coming together, and providing you on a platform, then everything else can link in. So it gives you a wider spectrum. But obviously, if we can build a national network of private hire companies, then we're going to be at the forefront, for all these big companies like DHL and so on, that they'll want to link into us. And obviously data is just liquid gold, because what we can do with data is, from a marketing perspective, and we can see in real time where cars are needed, or where we need to do a little bit of marketing, because we can see that zone is down 10% on last year and so on. So, if we had that power at the fingertips, that network of vehicles, then I think really we could be a prominent brand in the UK. And we've even, as we've spoken about, Callum, we've come up with some new branding for that. So really, we can maybe seen as the British Uber equivalent. So that's the future, but the future is almost here.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. And so look, we're jumping around a bit, but so the opportunity that you saw with MBH, obviously, MBH exists to help these small businesses to grow and scale and to level the playing field with some of those big boys. And so you already had that ambition of growing through acquisition and putting together this network. Just tell me about your kind of thoughts with that, and how that network of companies, how many are there out there? What's the average profile? That kind of.
Yeah, well, there's several. Well, if I focus on the owners first. So some of these owners inherited their companies from their fathers, their family businesses, well run, right, profitable. But some of the owners, might feel, well, the technology is kind of overtaking them. So some of them want to retire. Other owners are very young, but they just need that investment or to be part of something bigger. They need a helping hand, because there's, as any owner of a small business knows, you're doing everything, aren't you? From marketing to running the accounts department to, having sleepless nights, working 7 days a week. In my case, 2 divorces. So, just to be part of a bigger structure would be a massive help to them. Because also, if you think about it, if we had 20 taxi companies, there's a lot of duplication there, isn't there, of accounts departments, marketing, and so on. So they can be streamlined very easily. Outsource the call centers to Pakistan, improve their automation. Suddenly, they're already profitable. We can uplift them quite easily by a third, 4 times that within a year. So we've already had inquiries, as you know, from other taxi companies. We're actively speaking to 13 at the moment, putting proposals across. And out of that 13, most of the owners want to stay on board in some capacity. And, there's, and most of these companies are similar to ours in terms of they've already embraced the technology and want to move forward and become part of the network. So, there's a lot of interest out there.
It sounds like in my kind of limited experience, just having spoken to yourself and a few of those other companies that we've now spoken to, seems like it's quite a tight network. Like everyone seems to know each other, even though they're dotted around the UK. And
well, to be honest, I think we tend to get to know each other because we're all use the same dispatch provider, iCabby,
right?
The rival AutoCab. So we've all met at various conferences over the years. But it is quite, and obviously social media, WhatsApp groups, LinkedIn has brought us all together. And the common goal really has been learning off each other how to combat the likes of the disruptors, whether it be Ola, Uber, Gets, etc. And also within the industry, investors used to shudder at the thought of a cash business that was a taxi industry. Whereas, so it was very fragmented, but consolidation and investors are now coming into the market. So people are very excited about that, and we can see the way it's going forward. At one point, the taxi industry was written off. Now they can see it's going to form part of the mobility as a service platforms.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, I mean, we're obviously massively excited about that future, but we've kind of glossed over a little bit of the last to get from where you started to where we are today. You mentioned a couple of divorces and sleepless nights. It's it's fairly common amongst. I would say we typically, most of the businesses that we work with are on average a couple of decades old. Most of the business owners have been through a few downturns, so they've had a few bloody noses along the way. They've definitely accumulated some good war stories. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced along the way and what were some of the learnings you got from that?
I think the low part is always when you start a business, it's hard graft. And when you go in, when you start a business with guns blazing, because you need to get the revenue in, and that's the most important thing. Yeah. So, that was divorce number one. The first couple of years, literally working 7 days a week. And of course, I'm working in a 24-hour business that just never switches off. So drivers back in the days were calling me at 2 in the morning, got a puncture, problems and so on. That was a learning curve. And of course, you haven't got the resources to put a team in place, to doing accounts. So my advice to anyone starting off is make sure you have the structures in there, because your product and you just want to sell or provide that service. But what you forget about is your tax structures, your accounts. So the first couple of years we had our first VAT inspection, and we got it completely wrong because Ash and myself, neither of us are accountants, and we kind of found a very cheap accountant where we used to take a Tesco carrier bag full of our receipts and go, there you go, sort it out. And of course, we got behind in chasing invoices, so that created cash flow problems. We just thought naively people would pay us on time, but that was the headache of the first few years. I mentioned earlier we then got hit by to begin with. We focused or put all our eggs in one basket, which was in the student market. So when the tuition fee came in, that knocked us, to be honest, because so the bookings fell by 60%. So we'd expanded to that point. So then, of course, if the driver isn't earning, he leaves. And so because we have two customers, obviously, we have the customer that books, the consumer that books through the app or the phone call, but also we're earning revenue off the driver. So it's a partnership. So those drivers are our customers as well, and we weren't providing them with enough work in that student market. So that was hugely stressful and nearly pushed us under because we didn't really see it coming. So we'd expanded and taken on more cars, leases to pay, etc. So that nearly pushed us under, and that was divorce number 2. So I got the accounts right, but I hadn't forecast or seen this change. And obviously, more recently, March of this year, 2020, we had our best booking month ever. It was like, yes, we're smashing all records.
Cracked it.
Cracked it. Yeah, this is it. This is good. And then all of a sudden, we heard about this little virus that's going on in China. Well, it's all right. It's China. There's always something going on over there. They've always got the mask on. Nothing to worry about. And then I think there was a case in York, which the media said, there's a super spreader around. And this poor chap who had returned from his holidays in Switzerland or Italy, all of a sudden was, his face was all over the Daily Mail and newspapers as the super spreader. And I thought, well, it's all right, they know who he is. It's fine. 2 weeks later, we're into lockdown, and literally March the 23rd, I remember it's probably one of the worst days of my life because we literally went off a cliff. We were fortunate because we could, as a key service and with contracts with the NHS, we could keep working. But obviously, everything else, all the other business, airport runs, train stations, students, school runs, all stopped. And so we had a fleet of 620 drivers. Don't forget there are customers as well, with work that would have covered maybe 50 drivers. So it was literally going off. So we had to furlough staff, cut contracts with advertising, billboards, just get our overheads down. Looking back, it was the worst day of my life, and we had to restructure and furlough some very good people. I have to say the government were brilliant in what they offered, the support to the small businesses. We got grants for the shop. The banks were open to lending money. So obviously, what we like in business, and it doesn't matter whether it's a taxi or you're running a sweet shop, you like to predict the future and see where it's going. So, if there's a blip, you like to know there's light at the end of the tunnel, but none of us could foresee where that light was. And more or less, it's been like somebody turning on a light very slowly. It wasn't like the lockdown was very much like that, off a cliff. But coming out of lockdown has been a slower process. But actually, I hate to say it, we became more profitable in that period because of the help of the governments, because we streamlined more. I used to do meetings and get up at 5 a.m, do 2 or 3 meetings, go and see contractors and different suppliers. Obviously, Zoom has cut out that overhead of travel using vehicles and hotels and restaurants and so on. So we've become more profitable, become more streamlined. So, and of course, we focused on new products, supermarket deliveries. We adapted our own app to do click and collect. We launched the food app, Eat Me, which is a rival to Just Eat, and Uber Eats during this period as well, which created a lot of demand. So we were literally knocking on restaurant doors or farm shops, or one guy was even delivering tyres. So it wasn't just restricted to food; it was any kind of, as you said, last minute deliveries. And that's growing. We became more creative. We became leaner in terms of what we were spending out. So it's been probably the biggest lesson I've learnt in business. So although I had 2 divorces, that was nothing to the shock of lockdown. But e- everything that happens always provides an opportunity, doesn't it? Or
Mm.
you know, refocusing. And so I think yeah, I'd go through that process again because I enjoyed it in the end, but not at the time, not on
It's
March 23rd.
it's yeah, no, it's very interesting you say that because I mean, unfortunately, you weren't with us yet, but obviously we had a number of companies in MBH in the UK that kind of again had that hard lockdown and yeah, suddenly yeah, from a fantastic first quarter to nothing. Um, but it was, I thought what was really interesting is the fact that you'd been through downturns previously, like 60% drop of revenue because of the tuition fees, for example. What I saw with the principals in the group and what I've seen consistently with more experienced entrepreneurs is how they reacted to the lockdown. And it's you know, you talked about it very quickly, cutting costs, so
Mm.
you're cutting out your marketing expenditure, um, and starting to you know, pivot to look at the other opportunities. And I think I contrast that with I went through the global financial crisis on my own, and
Mm.
it was brutal to go through. And I, you know, 10 years earlier, I'd gone through the dot-com boom and bust at the other end. And but every time you go through these things, you pick up more strategies, and you do have that. You know that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it. And your job is just to kind of batten down the hatches and get there. And I think what was nice, as you I talked about a couple of times, but one is just having that experience to say, okay, let's look at what the silver lining is here. How do we find that? The second within the MBH group was there was a lot of sharing, and you'll see this now at your part, a lot of sharing of kind of best practice. Hey, look, this worked for us. This bank's being really useful. This bank's being a pain. This is how we're doing this. This is how we communicated to staff. We completely balls that up. We should have done it this way. And that kind of sharing, because everyone has
Absolutely.
a vested interest, is really cool. And again, it's what you're talking about with building this national network, is that ability to, you know, save some costs and share some best practices. And then the other thing that I think you've already got, but I think was new for a number of the companies that joined us, was because they had been through an acquisition process and yeah, it'd been a very positive thing. They're now looking at their market in a very different way. It's kind of like they've got this new set of glasses on and go, well, hang on, look, if that company is slashing prices because they're desperate for business, why don't we go and have a chat about and see whether there's an opportunity there to acquire them? Or, you know, so suddenly it was, you know, actually, yeah, this could be the best time ever for us. This is, and certainly we're seeing companies, especially the older owners that have been through a few of these downturns, so they know what it takes to come out the other side. They're just too tired. Yeah, it's literally. I'm sure you know people like that. They're like, look, I know what work needs to be done, but yeah, I'm 70 years old now. Yeah, if take the company off my hands and do it for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where for us there's going to be some really interesting opportunities, and I'm sure you're already starting to have those conversations as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it certainly made people focus, and yeah, because some of the owners were, you know, they got the business to where they want it to be, and we were almost taking a back seat. All of a sudden, COVID put them back in front of the driving seat, and they suddenly realised, well, actually, I'd like to be in the driving seat anymore because, as you say, I'm 70. I've been through too many of these downturns. You know, let somebody else now take the reins. You know, I'm ready to retire.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. So we've touched on the lowlights. So I thought just finish up on what have been some of the high. I mean, Freddie Flintoff aside, what have been some of the highlights over the past couple of decades in building your business?
Yeah, there's many highlights. I mean, even from taking on your first member of staff, I spoke at the beginning, it was very much 24/7. So even actually taking on that first member of staff to do the books, the accounts, or somebody to answer the phone, they're all highlights. And so as we add to the team, and seeing new faces and new ideas, that's the highlights. But I think my first highlight, I wanted to get to 100 cars on our system. I wanted to be the largest in the Loughborough area, which is where we started. And so get into that magic 100 cars it took a while. But for me, the moment we got our 100th vehicle on the system was a magic moment. And not in terms of monetary success, but in terms of just that target, hitting that target. Because after you hit 100 cars, the next 100 cars is easy to get on board because it gathers momentum. You're suddenly the prominent player in the area and drivers queue to come and work for you. So it was a case of that. Other highlights, I've always been a bit of a systems man. I like anything that makes things run more efficiently. I like KPIs, I like reports, and I like to see we're doing well, or if we're not doing well, I like to highlight things. So moving over to a cloud-based system for me was amazing because all of a sudden, prior to that, it was a server, and I used to have to sort of dial into it, and it was a bit clunky, and the hardware needed updating all the time. So moving over to a cloud system, so now I can sit on a beach in Spain, or I can sit next to you, Callum, in Singapore. I can still do my job, and to me that was a massive highlight because it meant I could work more hours and not cause a third divorce because I'm still at the house, or wait till she goes to sleep. So it gives you that flexibility. Many highlights of there. We've won awards for our marketing, national awards for our social media, those things. But for me, I still get a perk because we encourage feedback from our customers, good or bad. Every time we've done a taxi journey, the customer gets an SMS or a notification if they're booking via the app. Please tell us what you think. And every time we get a nice, 95% of feedback is brilliant. And I still respond to them individually, and sometimes we're getting over 1,000 a week. But to me, that is the best thing, and that it makes you realise you're doing something right. But equally, the customer that's taken time to complain is also insightful, and you learn a lot by that. And the fact they've taken time to complain is good because I wish everyone that had a grievance would write in, but of course people don't. They just vote with their phones or their apps and go elsewhere. But the fact that somebody's giving you the opportunity to respond to a complaint, it's nice to embrace. And I like to do that is offer them a free taxi or voucher, and then watch them progress from our stats to become a regular customer. So yeah, it's converting customers. I still get a kick from sales and marketing, and still love it, to be honest. And it's been great. And another highlight, Callum, obviously, is meeting you and giving us an opportunity for the future to go to the next level. So the day we signed the paperwork was a highlight, and yeah, fantastic.
That's good. I'm really excited about working with you guys, and I think I think you've built an amazing business, and it's great to have it in. But I'm even more excited about your ambitions and where it's going to go over the next few years. I think it's going to be a fun ride for sure.
Good. Absolutely, yes. We're out on the road this week. We've got 5 meetings with different taxi companies who have expressed an interest. So we'll keep you posted on how that goes.
Awesome. David, thank you so much. It's been a great trip down memory lane for me as well as for you, I'm sure. And yeah, no, hopefully our investor community will have got a really good insight, and hopefully they'll be as excited as I am about what's coming next. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Callum. Have a good day.
Find out more today at mbhcorporation.com.